struggle with trusting God when you're disappointed? Do you ask Him often, why, God, why, when you encounter disappointment in your business, in your marriage, in your motherhood, in your home? Today in the Possibility Mom Live, I'm going to unpack what I do and where we can how we can practically approach trusting God when we are disappointed. How to trust God when you are disappointed. Now, I have to just be so transparent with all of you, and just share with you that I create content when I am struggling with something. I've heard it said that, like one of the women in my Wealth Without Guilt group coaching experience, she shared something so interesting, how she doesn't want to share from an open wound. She wants to share when it has become a scab. And I think that there's a lot of value in that, but I'll be very honest with you. I share when there's a Band-Aid on it. And I'll tell you why. And this is a choice that I make. I'm not saying that, don't do it this way or do it this way. I'm just sharing this with you out of transparency, because I find it, for me, helpful, because I need to help myself. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm really struggling with trusting God. Like, what am I going to do now? I can't do it when I've just like hurt myself, obviously. I do it like, that's what I mean. I think the Band-Aid is an interesting one. And certainly I'm sure there are things in my life that are too hard to talk about. And I do need them to be a scab. But today is one of the days that I'm sharing from a place of Band-Aid. So meaning I have just gone through just a bit of a challenge. And I want to share with you, without sharing all the details, what the challenges have been. But I am very, very pregnant with my 9th child. In basically, I guess, like 12 years, 11 years. My oldest is 12. And it has been a very, like, I am tired. And when you get to the end of pregnancy and you're just like, come on, this baby needs to get out. Like, let's like get this baby out. Well, I typically, in all my other pregnancies, felt that around like 39 weeks or whatever the last week of my pregnancy was. I typically go early. But this time around, I have been feeling that sort of same feeling of like, I'm going to die. Like, when is this going to be over? So dramatic. Way earlier than previous pregnancies. And I've been trying very hard to not have a lot of, what we call in the coaching world, like just no drama about it, like just to observe it and be okay that I'm tired. But of course, the go-getter in me, the achiever, the person who really likes to get things done, has a bit of a problem with that. So I guess it's been an interesting season. And then in my Wealth Without Guilt community, and if you follow me on social media, on Instagram at Lisa Canning, you know that I hosted a Black Friday launch workshop. It was a really, really fun thing where I encouraged people in my group training program, and I made it open. You could purchase a ticket to the workshop where people came in and launched a business, launched an offer in 2.5 weeks. And we just wrapped that. And there was some disappointment in that group. There were some really fun wins. There were some people who launched their product for the very first time they sold anything on the internet. That gave me so much life and so much joy. In a group of about, there were about 50 or so people who signed up for the product. There were about 25 of those people who were very like actively doing the launch. I would say then another percentage of them actually launched like formally and then sold. And combined, we made just over or just shy of somewhere around the $8,000 mark. And for this group, it was a lot of first-time entrepreneurs. I was so proud of what they were doing. Anyway, But of course, there was disappointment. There was disappointment in how some of the sales went or the lack thereof of sales. There was disappointment in people working on Thanksgiving and feeling like they couldn't be present to their families. There was disappointment in maybe things just like not working in terms of tech. There was disappointment all around. And so, combined with how I've been physically feeling, combined with just sort of the natural rhythms of my life of 8 children, I have been dealing with disappointment both in my own personal life and in coaching people. And so I really just wanted to dive into how we can trust God in the midst of disappointment, because ultimately that is what we need to do. Ultimately, despair, hopelessness, feelings of self doubt, self condemnation are truly only going to be healed by understanding some very core truths about who God is. And that's what I want to unpack today. And so, whether you are in business or not, whether you are even Catholic or Christian or not, I think there is something in this episode for everybody. I want to encourage you to take notes. I want to encourage you to have this podcast because I put a lot of thought into what I'm going to share today. Have this podcast in your toolbox the next time you want to cry out to God and say, "Why, God, why?" Or the next time you want to cry out to God and say, "My marriage stinks. I am ready to give up." The next time you want to say, "How on earth can I have another baby when I'm this overwhelmed in motherhood?" The next time you want to say, "I should just go work at, Starbucks instead of trying to do this business that is so on my heart." All that stuff. Okay. So that's what I want to unpack. I'm going to tell some personal stories in this one. So I'm going to ask you for, to hold space for me as well. We're going to have fun. But before we get into all of that, I want to share with you a really fun invitation for something I'm doing on Monday. And that is a webinar where I want to share with you some strategies. I was talking about disappointment in business. And I want to share with you some strategies on how to navigate disappointment in business. Why, if you feel called to run a business, if you feel called to build a business, but not feel like it's in constant tension with your family, I want to really unpack some of these principles. These are principles that we talk about in my flagship program for Christ-centered entrepreneurs called Wealth Without Guilt. And there is a link where you can join me for this webinar on Monday. It's Monday, December 6th at 12:30 p.m. East. And I want to share with you a vision that, of course, I've been sharing here every week on the podcast. But the more work I do with the women I'm coaching, the more I sit with it in my own prayer time and my own quiet, the more the Lord has revealed, I just have such a mission to get women to make money to build the kingdom. It's just become so clear to me. I want to be able to help people get over limiting beliefs around money, help people get over the stories they're telling themselves around who they are and what they can do. I want women who are willing to put God at the center of their business activity, the same way that they can put God at the center of their marriage, their mothering, their home. I want to help women do that in business. And so if this is intriguing to you, if you want the same, if you are curious, like even if you're just curious, like how is it possible to make the kind of money that could open a school, build a crisis pregnancy center, support a cause like mental illness or Catholic school education? Like if you want to understand how you can do all that, but not at the expense of your family, I want to invite you to join me on December 6th at 12:30. And the link to register, it's completely free training. I will be sharing about what it looks like to build wealth without guilt. All of that is in the show notes. You can register for that on Monday. Alrighty, let us get in to how to trust God when you are disappointed. The very first thing that I think is so important to do, and I know you have heard me say this before on multiple podcasts, but you've got to embrace the disappointment. And this is critical and crucial. And, I would hear people talk about something called toxic positivity. And I would be like, I don't understand like what that means. Like, what is toxic positivity? Like, what's wrong with being positive? I really didn't understand it as a concept. And then as I got trained as a Catholic mindset coach with Metanoia Catholic, I began to understand, oh, this is why this is actually really damaging. Because it serves you in no way, shape, or form to deny your human feelings because these human feelings have an energy. Like, think about it. When you're about to cry and then you kind of stifle it, there's like an energetic force in you that it doesn't feel very good. I've heard people that I coach talk about how when they get really stressed, they break out into hives. When they get really stressed, they break out into sweat, like really, really bad sweats. Like it's all that kind of stuff. Like there is an energy to our emotions, and it serves us in no way, shape, or form to just bottle it up and just be like, I'm going to be positive about this. And so, what I argue, and I know you've heard me say this before, but what I argue is just embrace it. Embrace that the launch didn't go well or the launch didn't turn out with the exact expectation that you had. Um, it, uh, Embrace that you feel bad, that you feel sad, that you are mourning something. And I want to share with you something about the baby that was really challenging for me. um, and I'm going to invite you to just hold space for me if you'd be so kind. So I was getting really weirdly nervous about this baby. Can I remind you, it's my 9th baby, my second one in Florida. Like, it's not like this is a new thing for me. I know exactly where I'm going this time around at the hospital, like all that kind of stuff. Like, I just it's like muscle memory at this point. It's not, like, and of course there's a little bit of fear around pain and getting to the hospital on time, all that kind of stuff. But I was noticing this really weird, irrational fear of giving birth. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I was in denial. Like people were asking me, like, when are you giving birth? Like, what's your due date? And I would just be like, oh, I don't know, like sometime soon. Like I was in total denial. I wasn't doing anything to prepare. Girlfriends were asking me to like, hey, like we should have like a little party for you. Like I just was like, no, I'm not having a baby yet. Like it's like no way imminent. And it was interesting. I was actually talking to one of my clients who has very much become a friend. And I was like, at the end of our call where I had finished coaching her, I was like, hey, like I kind of jumped into friend mode. I was like, can I just ask you to pray for me? I'm really struggling with some weird fear around having this baby. And I know it's probably something else. It's not just like the obvious, whatever fear of, I don't know, like fear of the pain or fear of not making it to the hospital or anything like that. I was like, there's something going on here. And she kind of just like asked me a couple questions. And what I realized that was at the heart of it was because of restrictions with COVID, because of just to be honest, like that's it, just restrictions. My parents will 100% not be here for this baby. And they won't be here for like after the baby, and they won't, like I don't know when they will meet this baby. And as you can see, I have some feelings about it. And it is why I have been in denial. Like the more I thought about it, the more that I reflected on it, I was like, that is why I'm in denial. I don't want to accept that this is the reality. And what's the quote that I always quote? And forgive me to whoever said this quote, I really should have it memorized. But there is someone who has famously said, when we argue with reality, or when we try to when we deny that reality is what it is, we never win. We cannot argue with reality, unless there is a very interesting thing that happens in the next 4 weeks or whatever. My parents won't be here, and I it was like I was trying to run away from that reality in order to not feel the pain. But what I realized and what I want to share with you, even though, so this is a wound, by the way. This is an open wound. Like, this is not a band-aid. This is not a scab. This is something that I still am feeling very, like, just, I'm feeling it very, very much. So obviously I'm not, this is probably going to take me some time, and I'm just embracing it. And this is why I want to share it with you and share it with you in real time. This is something I'm struggling with in real time. And I want to share it with you because even as I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh, there's a freedom and a release that happens when we can just take that energy of disappointment and let it be with no drama, with no judgment. You know, you've heard me talk about here on this channel, we talk a lot about mental illness in marriage. My husband, we're very open about his clinical anxiety, his past clinical depression. We're very open about it. And this is something that is very relevant to me. Like, it's this sort of don't judge your feelings is an important concept in our marriage. You know, oh, you woke up feeling not so great. Like, oh, you know, to not judge it, to just not be like, you should feel better. Your life is so good. You're, the things that I was telling myself, we're getting into that realm of toxic positivity. Like, well, look at everything you do have and da 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 da. Like, no, just feel the feeling. It is totally fine for you to embrace whatever the disappointment. So the disappointment that I'm embracing right now is that my parents won't be here for this baby, and that I don't know when they will meet this baby. And the disappointment that some of my people in my business coaching are feeling is like, hey, I worked really hard and I didn't get a single sale. Embrace that disappointment. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. You are a human being. Embrace the disappointment and just go have, have a little cry. Like, don't put no drama around the fact that you have human emotions. No drama. So that's my first tip. In trusting God, when you are disappointed, just embrace the disappointment and allow yourself the amount of time that makes sense for you. I truthfully, I don't like to dictate it. For some people, it can be as short as 5 seconds. For some people, it can be 5 minutes. And for some people, it might be longer. But the key is that we don't stay there. And I know you've heard me say this all the time. we can't stay in that forever. So number 1, embrace the disappointment. Number 2, and here's where I'm going to get increasingly practical as we get on in this episode. Number 2, look for the evidence of how God has gotten you through. You might not be able to do this in a moment of true despair. And that is why I think it's so important to do step number 1, embrace the disappointment and just feel the despair and let it wash over you and let it release. But then I really believe that we can get to a place where we can look for the evidence of how God has gotten you through. So you know that I have, I'm a mindset coach myself. I love continuing in my own coaching. And we had again, I'm keeping this situation private, but we had a just a situation recently that was quite stressful. And I was really like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this one. And I remember calling her, it was like 8:30 or something. And I was like, listen, I either need a friend who is a mindset coach, or I need to pay you for an hour of time right now. And I literally was like, you pick. And she was like, talk. Like, she just was like, go talk, and I'm very, very grateful for her ability to do that. And I was explaining the situation, and guys, again, without getting into all the details, it was just like a very bleak one. And it really was really challenging. And she challenged me to do the following. It was beautiful. She just was like, I want you. It was like, and it was kind of fun. She knows my competitive nature. So she was like, I challenge you to do the following. And that is to say the words, Jesus, I trust you, but then follow up with the most, and she was kind of like, in the most enthusiastic Lisa Canning way, Follow it up with, I really do trust you. And then list all the reasons why. Now, this is tailored to my personality, obviously. Like she was making this specific sort of challenge, knowing my personality, knowing how I'm hardwired, knowing that like I am full of positivity and a little bit of like competition. Like it would be fun for me to be dared to say like how I trust you, Lord, and make that list. But I want to encourage you in your own way that makes sense for you. And it could be in journaling, it could be in a similar way to me where you literally like yell them out or whatever. But look at the evidence of how God has gotten you through in the past. And during that time that I'm talking about where I was going through something really challenging, I was like, Lord, you've gotten me through cancer. You've gotten me through a child being in extended. We've had 2 children who have had extended stays in hospital. We've had one who had a really significant, non-serious, but it was serious enough. We had to operate on something, and it turned out being completely not serious. No cancer, thanks be to God. But like I was just like listing it, like yelling it, like you got me through that. You got me through moving. You've gotten me through 8 babies. Like being born, like I just kept going on and on and on and on. And again, in that moment away from the pain, in that moment where you have embraced the disappointment and the despair, but then have had enough, but not too much time. Like you can do this very shortly after embracing the disappointment. And I would encourage you to do that. That's what's going to get you through this. That's what's going to remind you to trust God. I really do believe it's possible, and it is not a stitch of toxic positivity. This is just real. This is real. This is like banking, like understanding there are deposits in the bank account of how God has gotten you through bad times. And it's like a ledger or like looking at your bank account online. Like I want to encourage you to actually like, if you want to write them out, but actually look for the evidence of how God has gotten you through challenging situations in the past. You know, I'm being reminded of how important this was in our walk with mental illness. There were totally times, there were no 5-minute situations after embracing pain. 0 5 minutes. Like it was like 5 hours, 5 weeks, 5 months, to be honest. Like it was a journey of trusting God when my husband could not physically get out of bed and I had 3 small children to take care of. Like that was a journey of trusting God. But when I look back on all the ways he did provide, I can't help but be reminded of a beautiful hymn, "O God, beyond all praising." And there's a line in the hymn that is, blessings without number and mercies without end. It's so, blessings without number and mercies without end. And there's another verse where um it's just so lyrical and the music is just so beautiful, but it's I apologies, I don't have it completely memorized, but it's something to the effect of that even when it's hard, I will rise to bless you still. And that my sacrifice can be a sacrifice of praise. Even through the sorrow, I will rise to, I think it's bless you still or greet you still, and that I can make my sacrifice of praise. There is a, and again, this is a reality, and this is actually a really beautiful segue to number 3, is that there can be things that feel like they're not going away. And, you know, I'm reminded of my dear friend Stephanie Weinert, who really not that long ago lost a baby due to a very long battle. He was born, baby Beckett was born with a very a sick heart. He was born with Down syndrome. They knew that there were going to be health challenges, and what was supposed to be a routine thing for one of his conditions ended up putting him in the hospital for, I think, about 3 weeks, and never, going to his ultimate home, not coming home to his earthly home. And I attended the funeral, and it was the most, I've never heard words spoken about the tension and how you can hold in one hand pain and grief, but joy and hope in the other, and how that can coexist. And I want to encourage you, on my Instagram, there is a highlight where I literally typed out the homily that the priest gave because it impacted me so much. And so you can find that under the Instagram highlight. It's called Grief, because I was like, the entire world needs to hear about this tension. When you have a chronic illness, when, like what, do I believe that Josh could one day be completely healed from a mental illness? Like, I have no limitation on what God can do. But my inclination is that mental illness is something that we will always navigate. And it is just simply like, how are we navigating? Like, what are we navigating? Right. Cause he's had such a journey. We now, I would say, are in a very different space. Obviously, we were just talking about this. We will be 10 years dealing with mental illness. It came into our lives with awareness in 2012. We had obviously, it had been there the entire time, but we both weren't really aware that this was what was happening. And so we are coming up on our 10-year anniversary, so to speak, of having this be a thing we are aware of in our marriage. And it's just, we have chosen now to embrace it. Before, I ran away from it. Before, I was like, I want nothing to do with this. Before, I was like, this is way too hard. And of course, I'm a human being, so sometimes it does still feel hard. But it's definitely something we embrace, and definitely something we embrace together. And that's what I want to encourage you, especially if you are in the sort of realm of something like a chronic illness or a mental illness, something that probably won't go away, to embrace the cross, and that it is something that you can embrace, although difficult maybe in the moment, but that embracing of this cross has meaning. And that you are not alone in embracing the cross, that it is not meaningful that you are embracing a cross, but that this suffering can be for the benefit of others. I think of Stephanie Weinert, how and we have a beautiful episode together where she talked about a retreat that's going on right now that came out of this experience of losing her son. All of these new sort of clarifying. She's described it like a lens, like when you go to the eye doctor and they're like, is this one clearer? Is this one clearer? Just like her lens, or her perspective on motherhood has become so different as a result of what she's experienced. And that came as a result of embracing a very, very, challenging cross. But when we embrace it, I believe this is where resurrection happens, and where, I am no theologian. I have not a stitch of academic training in the areas of theology at all. I have the theology of, like, the life of Lisa Canning, like the hard knock, whatever, like lived experience. That was my seminary, so to speak. That has been my theology school. And this is just what I know to be true, is that when we can embrace the cross, there can be resurrection from it. And I was talking to my spiritual director today, and I was telling him, we were talking about this topic because I knew I wanted to talk about disappointment today. And I kind of I've described it before. I'm kind of like an insolent child when I talk to him. Like, I'm kind of a little bit like my 3-year-old sometimes, where I just throw down a tantrum with him. Like, I'm like, no. I'm like, literally like, nope, I will not accept that is true. I mean, I don't go as far to be like, you're a liar or something. But like, I sometimes am just like, nope. The same way that my 3-year-old, when I'm like, it's time for a nap, and she's like, no, I don't want to take a nap. I'm like, you really got to take a nap. Like, I can be a little bit like a insolent toddler with him, where I'm just like, that's not a satisfactory answer. And so that brings me to point number 4. So after we have embraced the disappointment, after we have looked for the evidence of how God has gotten you through, after we have embraced the crosses that don't go away, if you are still feeling like an indignant or insolent toddler and you're like, nope, like I get it in concept, but I can't feel it because this is too hard. Where I believe we need to enter into, and of course, this requires faith, but I believe that we have to go into this space of trusting that God is who he says he is. And what do I mean by that? So today, I'm just going to give you a very honest answer. I was like, Father Damien, like, these are all really great points you're making, but like, sometimes it just feels like, what's the point? Or sometimes it just feels like there's really no way I'm going to make it through this. Like, it's just, this is too hard a cross. This is too heavy a cross. And what he encouraged me to do was to look at, okay, did Jesus die and rise from the dead? And it was funny because, of course, my logical brain, like, because I was saying, like, I can accept all these things logically. Like, logically, like, I can accept. I have evidence of how God has gotten me through. I can logically do that all. But then sometimes I'm just like a toddler, and I'm like, this is too hard. I don't want to do it. I'm not taking a nap. And so then he was like, let's continue with this space of logic. Can you accept that Jesus died and rose again? And again, whether you agree with me or not, whether you are a Catholic, whether you have, this similar mindset to me or not, if you were to look at historical data, like if you were to look at history, there have been all kinds of things, researched and created, documentaries and whatnot, um, looking at, again, just the history and the logic, right? And I do believe that a person of logic could conclude that Jesus died, like something happened. Jesus died and rose again. His body was never found. There's been some uh, documentaries or shows or pieces of content created around that, even just that thing, like where was his body? Um, the fact that we have so many martyrs, and I don't want to get into this too much, but this week in the Catholic Church, if you're not familiar, we celebrated the feast day of St. Andrew. And St. Andrew was martyred. And the words that he said before he was martyred, I was reading it and I turned to my husband. I was like, do you think you could say this? Like, if you were really dying, like if you were like, he was crucified in an X, he was put on a cross on an X-shaped cross. And he like the words he was saying, he was like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to leave my earthly body. Like, this is, like he just was like approaching death with no fear. And it was funny. My husband was like, yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that that's how I would act, but he was like, probably not. And I was like, I would 100% not. Like, I was like, there's no way I would speak this way, fully accepting death, right? And there are so many stories of the saints who were willing to be martyred, Perpetua and Felicity, who, willingly walked to the Colosseum to be literally savaged, like, anyway, by animals, and how she spoke to the guard, and how the guard was like, you make no sense to me. How are you not afraid? And she was like, I'm afraid of the pain a little, but I'm not afraid of dying. And I just sort of, again, I think that we can go to that place of logic, that there were so many people willing to die for a man who is who he says he is. And so if we can, in that place of like, this is too hard, I don't want to do this, like throwing it down like a toddler, and we can go to this place of logic, like, God, okay, even though my human frailty right now is unable to trust you, even though I, just can't go to that place of embracing the cross. I can trust that you are who you say you are and ask Him to increase that trust. Ask Him to increase that faith. And then this brings me to two very practical things. Number 5, understand we're human. So this is what I was unpacking with my spiritual director. I was like, why is this so difficult for me? Why is it so impossible for me in times of disappointment, in times of despair, in times when I'm like, Lord, why are you not helping me out here for me to remember these things? And he was like, Lisa, you are a human being. And he was like, like, how long have you had to live? He was comparing the contrast between being maybe a child, like an only child, or like one or two siblings. And he was like, and your life currently where you have 8 kids, and he was just like, your children 100% know that the world does not revolve around them. And I was like, yeah, that's like an accurate statement. Like, there's not, you learn in a big family, this is just an objective truth in my humble opinion. You learn in a big family that sometimes you have to wait. Sometimes you have to not be able to do exactly what you want to do. Sometimes you don't get the first piece of pie. Sometimes you don't, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's just a reality of a lot of children living in the same house. And so he was like, you have lived with a very different understanding of like getting what you want than your children. Can you accept that that comes with, of course, some, like this comes with some ramifications in your adult life. Your children will have other ramifications for them based on their experience and whatnot. But be okay. The same way that you can embrace the disappointment, just be like, be okay that you are human and that your just natural inclinations, your natural will, your natural human tendencies are going to lend themselves to this kind of bias, if you will, or automatic response. And so then, where I really want to remind people, and this is so, 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 so relevant to people who are in business. This is so, so, so relevant to motherhood. I mean, this is just relevant, but I see this a lot in myself as a business owner. And of course, I have now up close and personal interactions. I'm so blessed by the women who have allowed me to coach them inside of Wealth Without Guilt in such an intimate way. And so I see that very clearly in that community as well. And that is point number 6 today, is to make friends with failure. Because what I think happens, and what my spiritual director so wonderfully challenges me on, even though I complain about it, when we are so afraid of failure, what is the root of that? Think about that just for a minute. Like, when you don't want to fail, what is it really like? What are you saying? Right? You're saying this is all about you. You're protecting yourself from looking bad, maybe disappointing people. Maybe you're protecting yourself from, just the natural tendencies of like being wrong or whatever. The faster we can get over failure, the faster we can make our lives a life of service. And this is what my spiritual director challenged me on today and challenges me on every time, is like, what if your entire life isn't about you? What if your life, everything you do, your business, your motherhood, your marriage, like, what if it all is truly a life of service? And again, do I want people to be doormats? Like, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that you like never stand up for yourself, that you don't have boundaries. That's not at all what I'm saying. Hear me loud and clear. But there is something very different that happens when you are able to truly not make things about yourself. And I think, again, like, if we were having a one-on-one conversation over coffee and you could respond back to me right now, like, I think in marriage, like, if we were to really just sometimes put aside our preferences we can really realize that it's not so scary to do that. That we'll be okay if plans on a Saturday don't go the way we want to, or, a party or an experience, like, the way that we pictured something to look doesn't turn out exactly. You probably have a lot of evidence in your life where when you have relented of your preference, actually it was for the benefit of all, that it got better for everyone. And so these are things that I are challenged with all the time, but that I really wanted to create some content on for you. Embracing the disappointment, looking for the evidence of how God has gotten you through, embrace crosses that don't go away, trust that God is who he says he is, understand we are human, and then finally make friends with failure. Make your life not be about you. That is how I believe that we can trust God when we are disappointed. And I want to leave you with one final resource, and I will put this link in the show notes after the fact. But it is a prayer by Saint Claude de la Colombière on an act of hope and confidence in God. And I'm going to just share my screen with you if you are watching this on YouTube. And of course, I will put the link in the notes so that you can see this on your own time. But I would like to just quickly show you this beautiful prayer. And here it is. So, my God, I believe most firmly that thou watchest over all who hope in thee, and that we can want for nothing when we rely upon thee in all things. Therefore, I am resolved for the future to have no anxieties and to cast all my cares upon thee. People may deprive me of worldly goods and of honors. Sickness may take from me my strength and the means of serving thee. I may even lose thy grace by sin, but my trust shall never leave me. I will preserve it to the last moment of my life, and the powers of hell shall seek in vain to wrestle it from me. Let others seek happiness in their wealth, in their talents. Let them trust to the purity of their lives, the severity of their mortifications, to the number of their good works, the fervor of their prayers. As for me, O my God, in my very confidence lies all my hope. For thou, O Lord, singularly hast settled me in hope. This confidence can never be in vain. No one has hoped in the Lord and has been confounded. This is my prayer today for myself. This is my prayer today for all of you. And I am just so grateful to be able to have these kinds of conversations, to be able to vulnerably share, what goes on with me. Sometimes when it's Band-Aid, sometimes when it's a wound that only has a Band-Aid on it, sometimes when it's a wound that's turned into a scab, and sometimes when it's gaping. I don't know. Yeah, sometimes when it's gaping. And so again, I just want to say thank you, Juliana, for watching and for your comment. I needed this today. Speaking to my soul. That was my prayer last night. Thank you. And EC, thank you for this comment. How you deal with making hard decisions to pursue your goal. I'm considering leaving my job to fully study and become an attorney and hopefully pass it. Oh, I'll be cheering for you and praying for you in that pursuit. All right, my friends. If you would like to join me at my webinar on Monday, you can find the link for that in the show notes. And as always, I am just so grateful for you and for being a part of the community that is Team Possibility Mom. And we will see you next time. Have a great week.